Alrighty, good morning, my friends. It is Tuesday, March 11th of 2025. Do a quick lesson here this morning. I want to talk about why we expected the market to continue to sell off yesterday. So I am kind of just showing you kind of the tricks of the trader, at least the tricks that I look at that help me to orient myself for a specific bias. Again, having a strong bias one way or the other, not necessarily a great thing, right? Because you always want to be fluid to what the market is telling you. We, we could be strong one direction and then have some major rejection and have a short market on the short time frames for, pretty good period of time for a pullback, and you can make money at the short side, and vice versa. You get the idea. The market is always evolving, and there's always new information coming in. So I think a couple days ago we talked about how we came in the market, we saw all the clues for a bounce for the bulls, but then we got new information when they rejected off the back end of the 200 or the VWAP, whatever it was, and they kept trying, and then they just failed right off of a major resistance, which gave us clues for the opposite direction. So you always have to remember, having a strong bias on the short time frames, it's going to change, and you should be changing as the market gives you new information. So let's get that out of the way. And let's go up to the higher time frames, and I'll show you what I saw yesterday morning and why I thought it was a clue that we were going to potentially retest the low from the day before or push to lower lows. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we do have clues. And when we came into the market yesterday morning, this is what we saw. So what I'm typically looking for from the major lows, if we're, let's say, for instance, if we're in a sell-off, and we obviously have been kind of inching lower here, sometimes a little quicker than others. And when we came into the open yesterday, we had pushed down to this new low. And what I typically see when we come into a major rotational area is I see a confluence of, in this case, bullish signals from the low that would give me the clue for the rotation higher. Now, when we came in yesterday, this is what I saw. You can see on the 60-minute time frame here, from the major low from the day before, remember we were trading kind of over here when the market opened yesterday. From here, I didn't have any type of bullish signal on my 60-minute chart. Okay, so 60-minute, not necessarily the most important. We really need to see that daily and that 4-hour lead a typical large rotation. But typically that 1 hour is there as well. So I noticed as we came into the open, I did not have a 1 hour bullish reversal pattern from the day before. Okay, now what would that have looked like if we did have a reversal pattern? It would look more like kind of what looked like here on March 4th, where we pushed to a lower low. So actually, if you look at the way this little area looks, and you look at the way this little area looks, you see how we have the major low, the major low. We've got this nice impulsive attempt to break out from there, get this nice strong move to try and break out. We actually break the previous swing here, and then we pull back and we're chopping in here. And here you can see we're pulling back and chopping in here, right? So if we were to go all the way back to March 4th, this is kind of what the market looked like. And when we came into the open, we actually did have a nice, clean, bullish divergence from the low of the day before. So you can see the divergence, you can see the push to the lower low, the same low on RVI, and then we got the bounce from there. And I don't remember exactly if we were calling a continuation, but we said I think we said it was in the cards. I think maybe because the 4 hour was on board, and I think they did eventually try to push, but never got through that major swing. Now, coming back here, when we came in yesterday morning, I didn't have that bullish pattern down there. And then when I went up to my higher time frames, I think the only time frame that was showing a clue for the bulls was the 4 hour. So if we go back to yesterday, this is always annoying. We came into the open somewhere around this candlestick here. And we did have a 4-hour bullish signal. So that was the only time frame showing me a clue for the bulls. And then on my daily, as you can see, we've just been pushing to lower lows, lower lows, lower lows. RVI is now pushing very extreme, getting very close to that lower end of the range and pushing to lower lows as well. So my daily didn't necessarily have a strong clue in terms of a signal. My 4-hour did have a signal and my hourly did not. So I did not have any type of clear confluence of bullish signals from the low of the day before. And so what I told everybody, because typically this is the type of price action that we get, is when we don't have those 2 or 3 time frames lining up, typically they come back, they retest the low, and they either make a double bottom or they come down and they do kind of like a peak below and then bounce from there. And when they make the lower low, maybe that's where we'll get the divergence, and that might be the scene of the actual rotation, the scene of the crime, right? So that's what I expected yesterday, because we didn't have the hourly, the 4-hour, and the daily in agreement. Now, just because we expect something, and like I said, with biases, you know how those go, doesn't mean it has to follow through, doesn't mean we're going to get what we're going to get, but it is a good clue for a lower low. So when we came in yesterday, here's the 9 a.m. candle that closed at 9 a.m. And then as we came into the open here, you can see we just went ahead and merrily sold off to lower lows, right? Then we came down yesterday, and basically now we're holding this pocket around the major eye level at 55.66, right? So that is kind of the lesson for today, is, you know, coming into the open and not seeing these 3 time frames, the daily, the 4-hour, and the hourly, coming into agreement, you typically are not going to see a large rotation. Now, I do have to eat my words sometimes. We all know that sometimes there's really no clues for something, and sometimes it's a news catalyst that causes it, sometimes it's not. But you don't have much clues, and then it goes in the direction you don't really expect, and it goes heavy. It's always possible, but more often than not. I always have to say this because anything's possible, and sometimes we do see wacky stuff, but more often than not, we're going to get a confluence of those 3 time frame signals, and that's going to be where the major rotation happens. So again, up top here, back in mid-February, we had a confluence on weekly, on daily, on monthly, on 4-hour, on hourly, back on the 19th. And it might have started to build up somewhere around the 18th, 17th, 18th, but 19th, we had it, and then we fell below 50% of the daily candle, and that was our first sign. And then ever since then, we've been in a very strong sell-off, right? So when these daily potential signals line up with my 4-hour, line up with my hourly, and sometimes agrees with the higher time frames up in the weekly and the monthly, I know that there's good potential for a potential major rotation. And sometimes it just leads to a 90, 100 point pullback, and then we get a reversal pattern, and it pushes 200-300 points against that, and it can get a little bit wonky. But typically these big major rotations, the major highs, are right where everything lines up. And you can just see here, the last couple months, nearly every big rotation in here had that signal leading it. So I know there's edge to it. I know how to trade with that potential. And again, I'm not going to give you a whole lesson on that. We'll be here for hours. But once I have things line up and a signal lines up and I have certain lines in the sand, I then know how to trade that, whether or not it works out or it doesn't, right? So that's a whole different topic, but I think that is a pretty good lesson for this morning. Again, coming in yesterday, nothing really lining up for the bulls from the low of the day before, and we had not pulled back to break the low. So I did expect they were either coming back to test it to give us a double bottom, a slightly lower low for the bigger bounce, and maybe the divergence forms from the lower low, or we just, we continue to sell off. And that's what ended up happening there. So if we were to go down to the short time frames and look at all the details, we could do that. I just don't have the time for it at this point. But we can zoom out, and I will just show you here still some pretty good opportunities as we really started to sell off. Some textbook plays. Now, I have to say yesterday, I didn't trade. I had other things going on. I had some other things on my mind as well. You know how sometimes you just don't feel like you're in it? I don't know. Sometimes I'm just kind of like, I don't really feel like putting risk on. Like, I just wasn't feeling good mentally. So I just didn't trade. And I did have other random crap going on throughout the morning. I'm currently doing a liver cleanse that takes 6 days, and I'm in the middle of that right now. And doing a bunch of random stuff in the morning. So I just kind of wasn't feeling it. And maybe the liver cleanse is whatever. But that's just kind of how the morning went for me. So I didn't trade. Luckily, I think there were some situations here in the first half hour that could have chopped me out. We pushed right through the first roadmap level. They did come down and then hold from that 56.88, but then kind of chopped up and chopped down. So it was a bit choppy there for the first half hour. But again, I didn't do any trading. And then, of course, after that first half hour of a little bit of wonkiness in there, then we start getting some really nice price action off of our levels. We hold right from the first major area, which was the low of the day before. We reject right off the 200. That first tag gave you a nice 5-point pullback for a pretty sweet little scalp. And then we fail, bearish divergence on that next major swing, continue to sell off. There's some additional tags. Then we bounce and almost to the tick. And I do have to kind of mention here that, again, even though we're heavy and we're selling off, they bounce basically to the tick off the first roadmap level. Not necessarily anything sexy happened in there, but then comes down into the next one, and that becomes the next major support. And there actually was a beautiful confluence of 3-minute and 15-minute signals there, and that very clear 512 divergence on the swing low, and then even on this third test of the level, right? Big divergence, and then that gave you a beautiful bounce. So again, these rotations are still happening right off these roadmap levels within a couple ticks, which just blows me away. And then they continue to sell off. They hold the back end of the morning support off of the roadmap level. That's now the major resistance. And if you look at the bearish divergence off that swing, again, basically testing the level. If we're failing 2 ticks in front, we tested the level, right? And there's a big bearish divergence, and then they continue to go. We get another bounce off the next roadmap level, again for a nice scalp, 7, 8, 9 points up, and then come all the way down. And then, unfortunately, yesterday, the low of the day wasn't our roadmap level, almost to the tick. Typically it is, but they come down basically 50% between the two, and we get the only bounce of the day, or the only large bounce of the day. So that's it. They did come all the way right up into that 56.37 area. Got a double top bearish divergence for the pullback, and then for the end of the day there, a whole bunch of chops. So as we come into the open, you can see right now, essentially coming down to hold around 55.65 and failing right off of 56.47 in the overnight session. You had a great short opportunity there last night to the tick right off of it, and then in the last hour or two, a bunch of bearish divergences on every swing high, just within 2 or 3 points of it, and now here we are on the pullback. And there actually was a decent long opportunity in the last couple of minutes, last hour, basically right off of 56.22, right? So that's it, my friends. There were some really great shorts last night. If you're looking over here, this is right when the This was right when the Globex session opened, and you had that first fade off the first roadmap level, which was the 200. and again the roadmap level for the pullback, and then they hold the back end of the next roadmap level for the deeper pullback, and you did have a long to the tick off that roadmap level there. So there were good little opportunities last night, and then if you were looking for an aggressive short, you had that beautiful tag of the FMA for a decent 10 point, 15 point sell off there in the middle of the night. And then you can see here on the rally that started in the middle of the night and brought us all the way back up. What do you know? We pull back and hold the roadmap level. We get through and pull back to it, again holding the FMA to the tick. Get up through the next two roadmap levels, pull back to that one and hold it to the tick right there, and then one tick in front, but it holds the FMA again, holds the FMA, gets through the next roadmap level, pulls back, holds it, right, and then fails off this all throughout the night. And then there's that textbook first tag of the 200 after a crossover, maybe 2 or 3 ticks of risk to get yourself a nice long right to the next expected resistance, where hopefully you took profit just in front of it and nailed basically the overnight high. Right, so lots of great opportunity here. Let's go ahead and jump up to the higher time frames now and see if they have anything new to add to the picture.